Hey everyone, he is Jonathan Ford. Follow him on X at FordJonathan5. You can follow the show at Ford News Podcast, and you can follow me at Miami Radio Beast. And we appreciate you always for listening and watching Ford News. Remember, wherever you're hearing this, subscribe to the podcast. And if you're listening to this, go hit up the YouTube channel and subscribe to that. Like the video, hit the thumbs up, hit the little bell so you know when new videos are coming down. And leave us a nice comment. Let us know how you think the show is going. Jonathan, as we are recording late Sunday night, probably by the time this thing is done, it'll be Monday morning, and we will be marking not such a great anniversary, but still the anniversary. It's been 2 years since the Supreme Court decided to overturn Roe v. Wade by making a decision in the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. And that basically took away the federal legal right to an abortion in this country. It's a sad anniversary, and one that obviously is going to play a big part in the election coming in November.
We have huge breaking news tonight, and I can't even believe I'm going to tell you what I'm about to tell you. But in a highly, indeed, as far as I can tell, utterly unprecedented leak from the Supreme Court, Politico has obtained what they say is an initial draft majority opinion written by Justice Alito showing the Supreme Court striking down Roe versus Wade.
It also took away just women's ability to seek a form of health care as well, because we know that a lot of that reproductive rights also ties into women being able to seek care and get advice from doctors, and knowing that not all these cases end up in abortion or anything like that. But it's remarkable. I can't believe when you brought this up when we started talking about it that we're at the 2-year mark of this decision that Donald Trump takes full responsibility for.
Over the weekend, former President Trump taking credit for appointing 3 of the justices who helped overturn Roe.
Thanks to these justices, we have also achieved what the pro-life movement fought to get for 49 years, and we've gotten abortion out of the federal government.
And you're absolutely right. This will be on the ballot, and let's just hope everyone takes it serious that if we don't take a stance now with the vote, this is just going to progress even further. We've already seen states starting to make it almost impossible for women, even in severe medical cases, to get an abortion. And just like in Texas, there's been over 23,000 pregnancies being forced to cover to birth in the case of rape. So it's definitely should be taken serious, and let's just hope people go out and vote in November.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge issue as we head towards November. We've covered it on this show before about how big the abortion issue is. But, I'm reminded that over the last years, in every election that has come up, whether it be local or federal, abortion has been a huge issue that has helped decide many of these elections in favor of those on the left that support a woman's right to choose.
Yeah, and we've seen that most recently in Alabama, where state representative basically ran on IVF and ran on abortion rights.
Alabama Democrat Marilyn Lance has been declared the winner of the House District 10 seat following a special election today. She flipped the Republican seat, beating her opponent, Terry Powell, by 62%.
And she won pretty handily against a Republican in what would be considered to most a deep red area. And that's why just looking ahead and looking back on some of the special elections, when abortion was on the ballot, Democrats did significantly outperform Republican opponents.
Yeah, we talked about this. I'm not sure if it was last week or the week before about the single issue voters, right? Of women or men that may see things differently from the way Joe Biden and his administration see things. But when it comes to abortion, they're pro-choice. And if they're a single issue voter, that's more likely that they're going to vote Joe Biden and down the ballot for the Democrats because of that side of the aisle supporting the right to choose. And so this issue is going to be highlighted this week because it is the 2-year anniversary. We're bound to get some more really important Supreme Court decisions coming down this week as well. And it's yet another reason why people need to get out to vote, because guess who is going to be the president that selects maybe 2 or more of your next Supreme Court justices to be nominated? It's going to come up in the next 4 years. And it's not just the Supreme Court justices, it's federal judges all the way down the line are the ones that get selected by who is president or nominated by who is president. So that's another thing. It's not just abortion, but it's the entire judicial slate that's on the ballot here in November.
Looking at a poll right now that basically shows that 70% of Americans believe that the Supreme Court got the decision wrong when regarding to Roe versus Wade. 64% of basically of Americans believe that abortion should be legal in most cases, and 61% of men were also included in that. 61% of them also believe that abortion should be legal in most cases. And the surprising part was even the Republicans being on the 54% that abortion should be legal in most cases, and independents also coming in at a net positive on this. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We are looking at 2 or 3 Supreme Court justices that could be retiring soon. And just remember in 2016, when we didn't take it seriously about Supreme Court nominations or ones that could retire, and Donald Trump ended up appointing 3, I believe, 3 Supreme Court justices, and that could be the same scenario that we're in the next election. So if you're going to be one that was angry about the overturn of Roe versus Wade, this should just give you more motivation to get out and vote. Because if you don't, you're gonna be seeing more decisions like this with 2 or 3 more possible conservative justices sitting on the Supreme Court. When if we vote and reelect President Biden, which I support 100%, and so does Brian, you could be looking at evening out the Supreme Court the way that it was meant to be, was right down the middle. So get out and vote, and let's, as men who are allies, let's make sure we support women. And remember that when you're voting, that just because we're pro-choice doesn't mean that we're pro-abortion. It just means that women should have the power over their own autonomy. And it's not my decision to make, it's each individual woman. And if you choose to be pro-life, that's great. It's your decision as a woman, but let's not infringe on somebody else's right to make a different decision.
And a couple of episodes ago, you did your Ford fact check on Project 2025, and ever since then, I feel like you sparked something. You sparked the rest of the media to get on top of Project 2025. Ever since then, it's been hitting the mainstream big time. John Oliver did a whole show about it. Everyone's been talking about Project 2025, and if you look at Project 2025, I mean, they're trying to take this country back into the Stone Ages. Not only let's get rid of abortion, but also birth control and IVF and all of these other things that have to do with the women's health care. They're trying to send back into a time that, where, women should stay in the kitchen. That's what they believe. And
Yeah, those are also concerning. And the also concerning part is that they also want to take us back to a stop and frisk era, where it's going to basically target the minorities in this country with giving up immunity to police officers. But also, Brian, we're going to touch on something next week. It's called Agenda 47. I don't know if you've read on it, but we're going to touch on that next week. It's another like Project 2025. Project 2025, of course, is sponsored by the Heritage Foundation, and Donald Trump hasn't come out and officially endorsed it. But the simple fact is that it specifically mentions, and they're giving power to Donald Trump and putting in loyalists for Donald Trump and firing possibly 50,000 service workers inside of our government to do whatever Donald Trump feels is necessary. And to me, that's just setting us up for dictatorship and tyranny. And nothing is going to, and I've talked about it before, that with this type of behavior, there's no checkbook that's going to stop him if elected on a second term.
Yeah, it's really scary. All right, we've got a lot to get to here on Ford News. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this. And we are back on Ford News. He is Jonathan Ford. Follow him on X at FordJonathan5. I'm Brian London. Follow me at Miami Radio Beast. Follow the show at Ford News Podcast. And please subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening right now. Hit the subscribe button and go find the YouTube channel. And if you're watching on the YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the thumbs up. Make sure you hit the little bell. It will let you know that that a new video is dropping. And then also write a nice little comment. And we'll have a little back and forth on the YouTube channel. Speaking of a back and forth, Jonathan, while I've been sleeping, in the middle of the night, you jump on your TikTok account and you start getting into it a little bit, a little debate with some of the MAGA TikTokers out there. Well, how's that been going?
Yeah, so when I get off work at about 2 o'clock in the morning or so, I decided to start looking at these debates on TikTok, and I kept finding myself in liberal leaning debates. And I didn't feel like that was going to be nearly as productive of my time as going into the MAGA leaning debates. And I've started to go into them and sometimes debating them 1 versus 5 on just some of the untruths that they've believed, going from Ukraine to the legal battles of Trump to conspiracy theories to just flat out untruths. And I've met quite a few people, the majority, I would say, that was completely misinformed on 99% of the issues. But I have found about 1% that were at least willing to listen. And a couple of them has actually changed their mind and reversed their votes just because they said that they live in a deep red area and they haven't been given the information that I was providing them during these particular debates.
So what are some of the major issues that they just don't know about, that they just have wrong because they're not getting the information fed to them by Fox or Newsmax or OWN or any of the right-wing media outlets?
So the most common misinformation that they believe is one is Ukraine, the spending on Ukraine. As far as their perception is that like this $130 billion just miraculously lands on President Zelensky's front porch, and he just scoops it up and takes it inside. That funding is used to basically redistribute our military equipment by replenishing old equipment or equipment that is about to be decommissioned, and they're getting actually military equipment, not cash. Now, some of it does go to aid in humanitarian efforts, but the majority of it goes to military equipment. And then the also another one is just the charges that were brought on to Donald Trump. They didn't even know that there was New York penal codes that were presented to Donald Trump in 2023, and he agreed that he understood these charges, and he's always understood these charges. So that would be the top two that comes across, and also probably at number 3 would be inflation, on just how inflation works and what the actual cause of inflation was with the out of control spending that started under the Trump administration. Even though I personally don't necessarily think that he was the cause of inflation, because it was needed at that time. Just like when President Biden also had out of control spending with inflation, it was also needed to stimulate the economy at that time.
Yeah, I think, when it comes to inflation and some of the price gouging that we've talked about here on the show, people seem to not remember that we went through a pandemic, which completely turned everything upside down. So, if you're going to ignore that, then you might as well not even enter the conversation. Just don't take part of it. And the Ukraine thing is funny to me. It's as if Joe Biden, right, like flies over to Kiev with some black duffel bags full of full of hundreds, and just drops them at Zelensky's doorstep. That's not how it works, but that's how they think it works. That's how they think it goes down. Is that we got a bunch of black duffel bags full of hundreds that we just drop off in the Ukraine. That's not how that works.
No, not at all. And I think it's just the most astonishing thing to me was just the amount of misinformed voters that we have that every year go to vote and they don't even know the basics of the information or legislation that's passed or why that legislation is passed or what it's doing. The majority of them couldn't even tell me what, like the infrastructure bill, who passed it or who passed the PACT Act. They or who just signed an executive order for border security or the insulin at $35. They don't even know that this type of information or these type of executive orders and legislation is being passed by President Biden. So I think to a certain extent, once you share this information, it kind of enlightens them a little bit to where they're like, oh, I actually agree with some of these policies, because their perception is that President Biden is extremely left leaning, like left, when in most cases he's a little more center than what most MAGA or Republicans lead him on being.
You know what's you talked about voting, right? Um, in the last election, there was like 100 million eligible voters that did not vote in this country. It's unbelievable. I think it was like 81 million voted for Joe Biden, 71 million voted for Donald Trump, but 100 and something million didn't vote at all. And that's just like people just don't seem to grasp that they really can make a difference, that their vote does count. I know sometimes we get down, we get depressed because our system is a little bit funky with the electoral college, but your vote counts. You need to get to the ballot box. You need to go put a ballot in the ballot box.
So that's even what I challenged even liberals or Democrats on these debates that would come into the room, or even the Republicans when they would say, it doesn't matter. I live in Tennessee. My vote doesn't matter because Republicans always win. Well, every vote counts. And there are tons of elections that come down to just hundreds of votes. And if everybody that said, I don't have a voice in this because my vote doesn't count, then those 400 votes could evaporate very quickly, and we could see swings in different states uh, that we have seen so far, just with Arizona and Georgia and all those now starting to go more blue than what they typically did.
And when people say, "Oh, I live in a red state, my vote doesn't count," well, okay, like I get it. If you live in maybe in Alabama or Kentucky, Tennessee, what have you, maybe your vote for president, maybe your state's going to go red for president. But that's not to say there's not some local school board election or a city council election or another local election that could be decided by dozens of votes or tens of votes or even a single number of votes where your vote does count. And they say all politics is local. So, I get it. It seems frustrating. Hey, I'm a proud, Democrat, but I live in, Tennessee or Alabama. Well, okay. Well, go vote for all the local elections where your vote definitely counts. Those local elections don't use the electoral college. They count every single vote for those elections. So go make an impact.
And often on local elections, that's where a lot of policies start. And I encourage everybody that even local elections are probably more important than what federal elections are, just because that's where money is spent, that's where money's allocated, that's where change starts to happen. So I would encourage, and I even encourage people on these debates that if you ain't going to vote for a president or you're not going to vote uh, for your senator or whatever, at least vote for your local school board or your local elections, just so then you have a voice in that. But if you don't vote, then you have no reasoning to complain when things don't go your way. Like you said, we had nearly 80 million people that didn't vote in the last election in the United States. It was 154 million votes. And if you don't exercise your civic duty, then to me, if I'm debating you, you tell me you didn't vote, I no longer want to have a conversation with you because you're not doing anything to change anything.
And the other thing is this, right? It's not just the down ballot elections and the local elections, but how about the referendum that show up on election day, like here in Florida, right? We've got two very important ones: the legalization of marijuana and the constitutional right in the state of Florida for women to have the right to choose. That is on the ballot, and that is going to get decided by every single person that votes. So why not go have a say in those things?
And also, why do you have to be so self-centered to just vote for yourself? Um, if you have family members or people that you care about, and you're so uh, dead set on your views, or you want to, like with women's reproductive rights, you want to make sure that your niece has those rights going forward, then you should be just as encouraged as somebody else that spent 30 years in civil rights movements trying to get these rights for women. You should be out there knocking on doors right along with them, trying to get people to make sure that, especially in Florida, where this is going to be in their state's constitution, correct? Uh,
Yep,
Brian, that's going to be like burned into their constitution as
yep,
women's reproductive rights. So
yep.
for Florida, it could potentially be your last chance when it's going to be states' rights on women's reproductive rights. And if you don't get out there and vote and turn Florida blue come the 2024 election, like Brian just said, the abortions rights for Florida or healthcare rights for women could potentially be gone until we get the next until 2028.
And Jonathan, you have such a sizable X following, and we're building up the following on YouTube, and we're building up your following on TikTok, and we're really trying to get to as many places as we can be. And I think anyone that's listening to this or watching this right now, or who follows Jonathan or myself on socials, it is incumbent on you to make sure you get people out to vote however you can. Get the message to people that their vote does matter and they need to get out to vote in November. It's really important.
Yeah, encourage your neighbors and also drive them. I don't know how many times I see on the news where there's buses just pulling up or vans pulling up, getting multiple people to go out to vote because they have no means of transportation or they're elderly and they just can't get there. So pay attention to your neighbors a little bit more. If you've never spoken to them, speak to them. If they want to vote, then make sure that you're participating in that process by giving them transportation. And I really don't care what political party they are, if they're Republican or Democrat. If they're Republican, be a friend and just drive them to vote because every vote matters on whether what side you're on. Now, I too want of course, the Democratic Party to come out in front, but first we have to just get people out to vote because 81 million people not voting in this country is ridiculous considering the statistics of other countries to where 80-90% of their citizens vote because they consider it like a job. And also, I encourage any representative that happens to stumble, if any do, that we need to make voting the day to vote a protected holiday, and everybody needs to have that day off. So everyone is more encouraged to go out and vote. Or for companies, if you're listening to this, CEOs, if your employee wants to go vote, but they are on the clock, you should pay them to go vote. It's an hour and a half of time, and it's their civic duty. And I just think it would benefit your company as well if your employees engaged in the process.
Totally agree with you, my man. A national day to vote holiday would be super amazing in this country. All right, we're going to take another break. But on the other side, it is everybody's favorite segment. Everyone I talk to, Jonathan, loves what we do in the third segment of this show every week. It is the Ford Fact Check. It's coming your way right after this. You're listening and watching Ford News. Welcome back to Ford News. He is Jonathan Ford. Follow him on X at Ford Jonathan 5. I am Brian London. Follow me at Miami Radio Beast. Follow the show at Ford News Podcast and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening, and go hit up the YouTube channel as well. And now it's time for our favorite segment we do every week. It's time for the Ford Fact Check. All right, Jonathan, what are we fact checking this week?
The far right has this notion that undocumented workers do not contribute to the U.S. economy. Their perception is that undocumented workers are like a welfare handout for the U.S. government, which is far from the truth. They contribute a lot more. So we're just going to go through some of these. So just people understand what the undocumented workers actually contribute to the U.S. economy. In 2018, they contributed $458.7 billion to state, local, and federal taxes. They also contributed $2 trillion to the U.S. GDP. Immigrants spent billions of dollars in state and local federal taxes. They were left with 1.2 trillion in spending power, which they used to purchase goods and services, stimulating local businesses. Proposed cuts to our legal immigration system would be devastating effect to our economy, decreasing GDP by nearly 2% over 20 years, shrinking growth by 12.5%.
Yeah.
And then the most astonishing thing is that we could potentially lose, just because of these effects, 4.6 million jobs. Rust Belt states would be particularly the hardest hit if immigration was just suddenly enforced, like Project 2025, where the cops, police force, or law enforcement would have immunity and be able to just basically search and stop people just based off the color of their skin.
There would be entire industries in this country that would fall apart if we didn't have undocumented workers. There's no doubt about it. And you're right. You know, the right just wants to say, oh, well, they come here and all we do is, you know, give them money and give them benefits and give them all this stuff, and they contribute to the economy like everybody else.
Yeah, and they would actually I think that they would definitely contribute more if there was a clearer path and quicker path to asylum seeking undocumented workers, just like President Biden proposed on day one in office when he came to the table right away with a legislation to do just that, or the Senator Langford bill that was put up for vote, or was going to be put up for vote, until Donald Trump squashed that because he said he wanted to run on that because it was a platform that he believed he could beat Biden on. But the Senator Langford bill, for people that think that the bill was trash or not good, was actually endorsed and supported by the Border Patrol Union. They called it one of the most significant legislation for border in modern history.
18,000 Border Patrol agents have all said this would be the best bill they've ever seen in at least the last 2 decades or more. It'll control the border. It stops catch and release. It's changing the interpretation and definition of asylum. It holds people. It doesn't put anybody back in our country. It puts 1,800 new agents out and 1,500 new ICE agents out in the country to make sure that we adjudicate as quickly as possible people that have been let go, to make sure whether they deserve to be here or not.
So there's two things here that I think we need to kind of separate. Is one, undocumented workers totally have a huge impact on the economy, right? That's one. We've just shown that with numbers and data. Two, there's a misconception that those of us on the left just want open borders. That we just let everyone in, open borders, it's all good. That's totally not true, and Joe Biden tried to do something about it on day one.
Yeah, so he obviously tried to do from day one. And President Biden, even before this executive order that he just issued, has always stated that executive orders were not the path that he should be taking, because the Constitution specifically states that the border responsibility is the federal government, the House, which has to be passed through legislation. And that's always been President Biden's stance, is that legislation was always the best path forward. Uh, but at some point, you got to stop playing the political games with the Republican Party and put forth an executive order that, of course, is going to be challenged. But that's where we are. And one of the notions from the Republican Party is that President Biden said he couldn't fix it within the executive order. And it's true, he can't. Temporarily, he can. But in the long run, the courts are definitely going to pick this up.
Well, the former president has told all of his lackeys in Congress not to work with the Democrats on border legislation because if it passes, that's only going to help Biden win the election. He doesn't want that. So he'd rather have this false narrative out there that Biden can't get border legislation done. And, Donald Trump's going to come in with the Superman cape on to get it done. It's totally ridiculous, Jonathan. There's no doubt about it.
And since the pass of the executive order, they've already just announced that the crossing at the border is down 54% just from the executive order. So it is working. And you're absolutely right. It's not we want a flood of people coming in here, but what we want it to be is easier through the asylum process for them to get citizenship, so they can contribute even more to the U.S. economy and also feel like they're part of the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Jonathan, we've got a big week coming up, and we're going to be all over it. You're going to be all over it on X.
Yep.
So many things are going to be happening this week. Obviously, there'll be a debate reaction that we will see going on. We've got Eileen Cannon down here in Florida. She's got some stuff to rule on. We've got the Supreme Court will be coming out with some decisions this week as well. So there's going to be so much going on this week. I can only imagine that you're not going to get much sleep as you continue to give us all the news on X at 4Jonathan5.
Yeah, so I was waking up when I heard that there was Supreme Court decisions coming down that was outside of their normal schedule. I was definitely making sure that between the 7 and 10 a.m. that I was awake, just so I could see these rulings come down. Like one of them was the reversal of the bump stock ban
Right.
that was proposed, that was put into place by the ATF during the Trump administration. And I was just up every morning, and I'm going to do the same thing through this week when those Supreme Courts decisions are supposed to come down. But we will hear cases about from the Supreme Court regarding obstruction, and the immunity case will come down this week.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. This is a huge week if you're paying attention to this country and the direction it's going to head in. This is a major week for all of that, and we'll be keeping track of all of it and certainly talk about it all on next week's show. But that'll do it for us on this week's show. We appreciate everyone for listening and watching. We appreciate everyone's loyalty to the Ford News brand. It's so much appreciated. Jonathan, thank you for another great show. Thanks to everyone who listened and watched. We will see you next time on Ford News.
Thank y'all.